You jerk, what are you gonna do about it? I'll let you off for $19,000. My son accidentally hit one of my mom friend's husbands with an ice cream. He claimed to be part of the mafia, and I've had issues with his wife before. At that moment, a tough-looking man approached us. Apparently, the man was his boss, but I recognized him. Boss. Long time no see. Hearing those words, my mom friend's husband was stunned. I decided it was time to reveal a long-kept secret. I'm Misty, 46 years old, and have 2 children. My husband worked away from home, so I usually lived with my kids. My daughter was 16 and very responsible and calm, so she hardly needed any attention anymore. However, my son Shane was 10 this year and still very mischievous. He hardly ever listened to me, which was quite troublesome. Even so, I've always protected and cared for both of them. In my son's class, there was a quiet but very noticeable boy. His name was Tyler, and his father claimed to be part of the mafia. We tried to keep our distance from them for the sake of our children. But his wife Kimberly was a troublesome person who liked to interfere with others. Especially since Shane was quite noticeable in class due to his mischievousness. This seemed to irritate Kimberly, and she started to pick fights with me. What are you staring at? Got something to say? Kimberly dressed in flashy clothes as usual and came to the elementary school shouting. She was wearing a pink dress covered in glitter, with a large open back. At a glance, it looked like she was going to a nightclub. Today was a parents' day, so many parents were at the school. I wasn't particularly looking at her, but her eye-catching fashion made everyone look twice. I was heading towards Shane's classroom, trying to avoid Kimberly, when I saw a timid-looking man being confronted by her. Other parents were watching sympathetically from a distance. What are you glaring at? Answer my question. She shouted loudly, so I couldn't just stand by and ran over to Kimberly. Hello, Kimberly. I don't think he was glaring at you. You again? Got a problem? Kimberly turned her attention from the man to me. In the meantime, the man quickly left, and I sighed in relief. I've always been a meddlesome person who couldn't stand seeing others in trouble. I knew it was a troublesome trait, but I couldn't help it. Since Kimberly often caused trouble for others, I had warned her many times. That was why she considered me an enemy. Recently, she would pick fights over trivial matters and yell until she was satisfied. I tried to avoid her as much as possible, but she always spotted me, which was troubling. So today, I planned to leave quickly to avoid dealing with Kimberly after Shane's class observation. However, I couldn't ignore the man who was almost in tears after being yelled at. You don't have to yell like that. He wasn't looking at you with any ill intent. You insolent woman. My husband is in the mafia. You'll get yours someday. Kimberly said, leaving with a parting shot, and headed towards the classroom. I was also heading to the same classroom, but if I followed her now, she'd start another fight. So I waited a bit before going to Shane's classroom. I decided to watch Shane's class from the hallway. Because Kimberly was seated right in the middle of the classroom. Shane was restless as usual and kept glancing back at the parents, talking to the kid next to him, and getting scolded. I thought it was quite troublesome, but the class finally ended without further incident. I thought I would say a few words to Shane before leaving, so I entered the classroom, where Kimberly was pushing through other kids to get to her son. Then she yelled loudly, Tyler, do you have any motivation? You didn't raise your hand even once and just kept looking down, pathetic. We were all shocked and turned our eyes to Kimberly and Tyler. Since Tyler was already yelled at by his mother and also under the gaze of everyone around, he shrank even further. Don't lose to that woman's kid. Kimberly shouted this while glaring at me standing at the classroom entrance. I was caught off guard by her sudden glare and startled. Other parents also gave me sidelong glances, making me feel uncomfortable. Shane was walking over to me but sensed the atmosphere, tensed up, watching Kimberly and Tyler. Tyler looked down, his face pale from the shouting, but Kimberly continued to yell without mercy. I couldn't stand it anymore and ran over to Kimberly. Your son is scared. You don't need to shout like that. Tyler was attentive in class and took good notes. Just being a bit shy and not raising his hand isn't a big problem, is it? At my words, Kimberly turned red and glared at me. Mind your own business, will you? I wasn't trying to interfere, but you were clearly referring to me, so I felt the need to speak up. As I calmly said this, Kimberly became even more agitated and advanced towards me as if to grab me. We stared at each other for a while, but Shane's teacher arrived with a male gym teacher, so he would prevent a physical confrontation. I felt relieved, so I glanced at Kimberly and left the classroom with Shane. You'll regret this. I'll make sure you never talk back to me again. Kimberly yelled as I left, and I probably had a bitter expression on my face. A few days later, true to her word, Kimberly came after me. It happened when I took Shane to a large park. While Shane was waiting for his friends, he ran around causing trouble, so I decided to give him something to eat to calm him down. After catching him, I asked what he wanted to eat, and he cheerfully said ice cream, so we headed to a nearby ice cream shop. Even though it was a cold day, Shane was delighted with a big soft serve ice cream, so I watched over him. On our way back to the park, Shane suddenly ran off, probably seeing his friends. Shane. It's dangerous. Ignoring my shout, Shane dashed towards the park. I suppressed a sigh and hurried after him. That's when it happened. Shane fell on his backside right in front of me. As I rushed over to brush the dirt off his clothes, a deep voice boomed above us. Looking up, I saw a thug-like man standing there. When our eyes met, I let out, "Ah," involuntarily. This was the man Kimberly had once boasted about being her mafia husband. His name was Sheldon. You little punk, what are you gonna do about this? Apparently, Shane's ice cream had stained his pants. I stood up and apologized, offering to pay for the cleaning, but Sheldon wasn't satisfied with my attitude and complained. Would $50 for cleaning be enough? As I took out my wallet, Sheldon smirked and said, I'll let you off for $30,000. I was shocked and instinctively looked up, only to be met with a threatening glare. That's an unreasonable amount. I protested, but Sheldon angrily claimed his pants were high-end and that it was my fault for not watching my kid properly. As I stood speechless, a voice called out from behind him. Shelly, what are you doing? Hearing that voice, I thought, this is the worst. Sure enough, it was Kimberly running towards us. She saw me and immediately wore a scowl. Are you here to complain? Kimberly said, then smirked maliciously as if she had a sudden idea. I sensed trouble and positioned Shane behind me protectively. Kimberly puffed out her chest and introduced the man. This is Sheldon. My husband. Remember I told you my husband is in the mafia? Well, here he is. Kimberly clung to Sheldon exaggeratedly as if she was showing off. Watching them, I realized her claims were true. But I wasn't scared. More than that, I needed to protect Shane. I greeted Sheldon and apologized again for Shane hitting him with the ice cream. But reiterated that I couldn't pay the $30,000 he demanded. Kimberly sensed an opportunity and began to berate me. This woman is always so uppity. Her kid has no manners. And she always disrespected me. So think of that $30,000 as compensation. If you don't pay, you know what will happen. Because Shelly is in the mafia. Kimberly said triumphantly, but I still refused. Kimberly glared and yelled. Give her a lesson. Sheldon stepped forward and glared down at me. I met his gaze without flinching. Are you ready to face the consequences of defying the mafia? You'll pay for this. Sheldon threatened. Hearing his voice, several men gathered around. They seemed to be his subordinates, and they gave me and Shane terrifying looks after hearing what happened. I was prepared to be hit and stood firm while shielding Shane, who had started crying. At that moment, a very large man appeared. His stern face and imposing physique made it clear he was no ordinary person. Immediately, Sheldon and his men bowed their heads. The man glanced at them and growled in a low voice, asking what was happening. I recognized him. Eugene, I said. The man looked at me when I called his name. And then he hurried over with a surprised expression. Misty. Long time no see. His words stunned Sheldon and his men. It was indeed Eugene. He was a man who had looked after me a lot when I was young. Long time no see. How have you been? Doing well. What brings you here with my men? I explained that Shane had hit Sheldon with ice cream. But I didn't mention the $30,000 demand. I knew the consequences. If I tattled lightly, it could end Sheldon and his family's lives. I'm sorry for the trouble. I'll pay for the cleaning. No need. I can't let you spend your money like that, Misty. Right, Sheld? Sheldon was clearly flustered and nodded silently, sweating profusely. He briefly met my eyes, seeming to ask what my connection was to Eugene. But I didn't explain. It would take too long, and parents at the park were watching us. Before the police could be called, I wanted to leave. At that moment, Kimberly interrupted loudly. She shook off Sheldon's attempt to stop her and advanced towards me. What's going on? Ignoring my silence, Kimberly demanded an explanation. Seeing the tension return to Eugene's face, I decided to reveal the truth. Eugene was my father's right-hand man. Hearing this, Sheldon and his men instantly understood and trembled with fear, but Kimberly still looked puzzled. I don't get it. Speak clearly. I was thinking of a way to avoid explaining, but Eugene lost patience and grabbed Kimberly's shoulder and pulled her away from me. Hey, Sheld. Your wife is being disrespectful to the boss's daughter. Do something about it. At Eugene's angry words, Kimberly finally understood and gasped. As she stood there bewildered, Eugene muttered "ah" and covered his mouth. I sighed, unable to blame Eugene. Ah. Sorry, Misty. Sigh. I was trying to keep it a secret. While I was whispering this, Kimberly, who had been shocked, leaned in again. You're a mafia boss's daughter. Why didn't you say anything until now? I explained to Kimberly with a bitter expression. I didn't want anyone to know my father was in the mafia. Besides, I was living with my mother by the time I entered middle school. My father divorced my mother to keep us safe from the mafia life. I've been keeping it a secret ever since. As I confessed, Kimberly looked more and more shocked. She clung to Sheldon in panic. What are you going to do? You asked for $30,000. Kimberly became visibly shaken and looked at Sheldon. He tried to cover her mouth, but Eugene had already heard. $30,000? What's this about? Eugene's low, menacing voice echoed. You idiot. Why'd you say that? Sorry. I was shocked, it's not what it sounds like. Kimberly tried to backtrack, but fell silent under Eugene's piercing gaze. Sheldon's subordinates also averted their eyes and stepped back. As Eugene approached them, their faces grew paler. Hey, why are you looking away? Got something to hide? Eugene growled and made Sheldon meet his gaze. Kimberly clung to Sheldon's arm, trembling. Speak up. Finally, Sheldon admitted that he had demanded $30,000 from me over a dispute. Eugene frowned and glared silently at Sheldon. I didn't know she was the boss's daughter. I'm really sorry. Sheldon bowed his head, but Eugene grabbed his hair and snarled. You're apologizing to the wrong person. Sheldon's face turned pale. He hurried over to me and apologized. I looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. Eugene stood next to Sheldon and deeply apologized, glaring at him. Sheld, you idiot. Your mistake is my mistake. Remember that. I'll report everything to the boss. Be prepared. Sheldon, who was cowering, was further berated by Eugene. Then, perhaps thinking of the consequences, Sheldon turned pale and began pleading for forgiveness. Even so, Eugene's anger showed no signs of subsiding, and he looked ready to throw a punch at any moment. As I was seeing him intimidated to the point of tears by Eugene, I couldn't stand it any longer and decided to intervene. Eugene, please calm down. It's fine, let's keep this between us. But if I hadn't shown up, these guys. It's fine. They only demanded money in the end. Besides, if I tell my father about this, won't it also affect your position? Eugene realized that and looked down with a bitter expression. I've been prepared. I believe we need to report this, so I'll handle this matter myself. Thank you for your concern. Eugene reiterated this and then took Sheldon and Kimberly home. I just saw them off since he said so, but Eugene wasn't directly at fault for what happened this time. I felt somewhat worried, so I immediately called my father. After discussing it with my father, Eugene was effectively cleared of any wrongdoing in this matter. However, Sheldon and Kimberly couldn't be let off the hook. Although my father didn't say it explicitly, he mentioned that Sheldon and his subordinates would be assigned the toughest jobs. That was beyond my knowledge as an ordinary person. My father had his own way of handling things. Meanwhile, Kimberly had become very subdued. I heard she was getting a divorce from Sheldon and would become a single mother. She looked more worn out each day due to balancing work and raising her child. Her clothes were no longer what they used to be, but just plain and inexpensive outfits. Seeing Kimberly like this, I wondered if I should help, but I felt guilty every time she seemed afraid of me. So I decided it was better to stay away. I still had a good relationship with both my parents, and we regularly had meals together. My husband will soon return home from his business trip, and I am looking forward to it. Though my family is a bit unusual, I feel very happy.